Well, good morning, Light Point. How we doing? All right, y'all are much better than the first service. They acted like it was like 8 o'clock in the morning or something back then. I don't know what it was. You guys, a lot of y'all are the 9 o'clock people who are like, nah, I'm not getting up. It's cold. I'm tired. Well, welcome. We're expecting a full house at 12 o'clock, completely full, from all the people who slept in and waited for the rain to end, the smart ones. Well, today, yes, I don't know what I'm talking about. That was an awkward laugh over there. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're laughing at me. Is my zipper unzipped or something? I got a booger hanging. I'm sorry. Well, good morning. Start over. Hi, I'm Chris Roop. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. Super glad y'all are here. No, we're super excited, man. We're starting a new series today, Undeniable, and I'm super excited about it because all this is kind of working and building up to Easter, which is the greatest miracle of all. Because listen, if death is reversible, then anything is possible. And so that's the big miracle that we're going to kind of end this whole series with. But today, we're starting this whole series about Undeniable. And I kind of want to first, this is kind of the overview for the series today. And I want to kind of deal with kind of the bigger problem. And what I personally have noticed is that for many of us, we don't recognize miracles because we're so distracted, which is why I had this nice little shirt made up with my big point. Are you distracted? Because I feel like it's the distraction that keeps us from actually seeing what God has for us. We just get so distracted by all the busyness or our head or kind of in a zone that we miss what God has for us. So John, in the book of John, this is kind of the series overview verse that I want to read to us, and it kind of talks about this whole issue and why it is so important with the miracle. So let's look at John chapter 20, 2 verses, 30 to 31, and this will carry us the entire series and kind of serve as an overview. You ready? Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples. So he did a lot of things, but they're not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe. So John's basically saying, hey, there's a lot that was done, but I took some I want to show you for a specific purpose, and that is that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. And so that's what's may have life in his name. And so that's why we're kind of doing this. We want to point out some of these miracles, show you some of these significant miracles that he points out. But at the same time, I want to say, don't miss it. Don't miss the ones that are right in front of you. And I want to give you an example of a miracle that sometimes gets overlooked, that's just right in front of us all the time. And I'll bet some of us have never even thought about it. It's this daily miracle that we have. So, and here's how I started down this path. I saw this optical illusion once, and then I was trying to figure out how in the world that was even possible, because sometimes optical illusions are those things that play with your head, you know, and they mess up your head. And so I looked up this guy who's explaining optical illusions. He's a neuroscientist. And so he's explaining how these optical illusions work. And when he did, I'm like, nobody's talking about this. How do we not know this? It's crazy. And I'm going to say it. Some of you are like smarty pants. You've been to school. Who cares? For the rest of you that are dumb like bricks like me, you're going to be angry. You're going to get mad because nobody's talking about it. You ready for this? I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give you an incredible miracle. You know what it is? The eyeball. I know you're not impressed yet. Hang tight. I got something for you here. Check this out. I'm not messing with you guys. Listen. Did you know that you don't see with your eye? I know, right? Some of you smarty pants, tell them what it is. You see with what? Your brain, not the eyeball. I know, I'm dumb. Hang with me. It gets better. Our eyes are made up of over 2 million moving parts. 2 million moving parts are happening inside of your eyeballs. It gets better. Each of your eyes contain 107 million cells, and all of them are light sensitive. That's a lot of cells. When you blink your eyes, it helps to remove debris. That makes sense? But it also spreads those tears over your eyes. And those tears will moisten, lubricate the eyes, but they even have a really crazy important role. They serve as an antibacterial component in your eye to prevent it from getting infected. I know, right? Every time. If you were to scratch your cornea of your eye, if your eye has the ability to heal itself in 48 hours. 48 hours, it'll heal itself. We have a blind spot, every single one of us, which is where the optical illusion thing comes in. There's a blind spot where the cortex, the optic nerve attaches to the retina. And in that spot, there's two blind spots. But here's what's crazy. Your eyes work together to fill in the blind spots. On its own, without you even telling it to do it. It just fixes them. And here's the crazy one. Did you know that when you're depressed, that colors are more dull? Your body actually adjusts to your mood. I'm just going to tell you something. If I drove a car up in here right now, and I told you that for the last 10 billion years, things have been hovering around and beating against each other for billions of years, ta-da! And I'd say it's just a miracle. I mean, over billions of years, parts just kept hitting each other until eventually we have a car. You would say, you've lost your ever-living mind. You're a moron. An engineer engineered that car because it's communicating. There's parts and pieces. There's electronics, and they're firing and telling each other what to do without you doing it. It's engineered and created. But we just go, nah, not with the human body. It's just billions of years. And all I'm trying to say is if that's true, let's just go to my other, because this is all in your body, by the way. That's just the eyeball. Have you ever looked at the ear? Would you like to this morning? It's pretty disgusting. There's some things going on there. But like the equilibrium is crazy. Without the equilibrium, you couldn't even stand up. So what happened between the time there was no equilibrium to here? I don't know if you've ever had vertigo, but it is not good. You know, you're just on the ground. Done. And the fact that nobody's talking about this, that it's just a coincidence. Listen, I'm telling you, it's a miracle. And we don't see it because we're so distracted. And that's why I feel like it's important that we ask this question over and over again. Did you see it? When you wake up tomorrow, did you see it? Are you looking for it? Or did you miss it? Because it's critical that we don't miss it, that we see what God has for us. So there's a quote, because I feel like miracles are all around us. And Albert Einstein has just this brilliant quote that I want us to look at. Let's put it up on the screen, and let's kind of read through this and see what it says. There are only two ways there are only two ways to live in your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. Two ways. One, nothing's a miracle. The other, everything is a miracle. Listen, you don't have to look very far to see miracles that are all around us every single day. And we miss it. Just because we don't acknowledge it, just because you don't see it and talk about it, discuss it, doesn't mean it's not there. All these things are miracles. However, here's what's interesting. Sometimes what God will do, so you got these everyday miracles going on because you're all like going, oh man, but those aren't the fun miracles. I mean, those are just the miracles, the whatever. God steps in from time to time and he breaks the rules. There's rules to the system, right? He'll step in, he breaks the rules, and this is what John's talking about. Listen, Jesus did all kind of things, we didn't talk about it. Then all of a sudden, right, He did all of these things, and all of a sudden, there were some things I want you to see because these will change your life, right? And so these were the big miracles. And then that's the question is you have to be looking for it to actually see it. So I want to jump into this first miracle that he does. This is kind of the overview text. And the first miracle is actually the first miracle that Jesus performs. It's the turning the water into wine. It's that miracle of the shift. And here's a problem. I'm going to say it again like we talked about up front, because if you remember, we said from the very beginning, the thing that's going to cause us to not to see it is that we're going to miss it because we're distracted, right? All these things are happening, we get distracted and we miss what God has for us. And so I feel like I need to ask that question again. I'm going to show you how when you're distracted that you miss it. Did you see it? How many of y'all saw it? How many of you didn't see it? How many of y'all did not see the fact that I'm no longer wearing the same shirt I was? In front of you, while you were right here, I had some monkeys come down out of the ceiling and took my blue shirt that said, "Are you distracted?" Because you were. And they changed my shirt right in front of you. Thank you. Somebody's impressed. Ben's got my back. Do we need a moment to process? Do we need a moment? You're like, Chris, you're not good at a lot of things, but that was pretty good. The band right before I came out, they still won't know how I did it. I'm like, no, I can't tell you. Look for the monkeys. They're coming down. So here's my point. I'm just trying to give you a moment to process it, because last service they kept talking about it while I was trying to preach. I was like, just go and get it over with. Just kind of deal with it. It's pretty good. So here's the thing. There are two reasons that we miss it. The reason we don't see it, and that's my new point. I had one point, I got a new point. Did you see it? And my new point is the reason that we don't see it, there's two reasons. Because we usually fall, the reasons you miss it are for two, depending on which group you're in, one of two groups. One, the group that, man, you're looking so hard for a miracle. And you're praying, you're like, God, I really need this miracle. And you're staying on it, and you're praying to God about something very, very specific, that in the midst of it, you're so desperate for that one thing that you miss the miracle in the thing. Because oftentimes the miracle that God has for you is not the one that you're looking for. You know, you keep being so specific, and it's like being distracted, right? You're over here looking for this one thing. God, please give me this, give me this, give me this. And God's like, well, I'm giving you this, and I'm giving you this, and I'm giving you this. And we miss what God has for us. The second group is me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a fixer. I like to fix things. And so as soon as a problem happens, you know, I don't even think about God, right? I'm just like, go fix it. And I start working to solve it, start doing this, start talking to people. I got to figure it out. I got to fix it. And then in that same group are the people who don't even, because I believe in God. I think God can do miracles, but I'm too stupid to go ask him for one. You know, that's my problem. But there's the group that don't even consider God, of course, and they just go and work and fix it and trust in books and research and other things, which are not bad things in and of themselves, but alone they're missing something significant. There's another component to it. So today I want to help you to see it. That's kind of my goal. And we're going to do it in this story that John tells. John's like the young disciple who follows Jesus, and he is considered like Jesus' little buddy, if you would. And he shares 7 significant miracles in the book of John. 7 things that he kind of points out are important. And this is the first one. Now, so you know, the water into wine is at a wedding thing in Cana, and it is the kickoff of his public ministry is where that's going to happen. So John chapter 2, let's look at the first 11 verses. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Check this out. Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour is not yet come." And I know it's a hard verse. It's weird. It doesn't make sense, but hang tight. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding about 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the water, fill the jars with water, and they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it, and when the master of the feast tasted, the water now had become wine, and did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, everyone serves good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then they bring out the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, the verse 1 and 2, and even going into 3, but at the very beginning, it starts off the one thing that seems strange. It's at a wedding. A wedding. I'm just saying, my public, you're thinking about, here's a guy that all the Jews, to me, this proves Jesus is who he said he was. Because if you were a king, a ruler, which keep in mind, this is what the Jews were looking for, is this king was going to usher himself in. He would become the ruler, the Messiah over this land that would overthrow governments and all this stuff. And so Jesus comes in, and his first miracle is at a wedding. Listen, his first miracle is going to turn water into wine when they ran out of drinking material. That was the thing. Weddings were a huge deal in that day and time. And so for them to have ran out of wine was a huge deal. And this is how he's going to manifest himself? Helping them out, because the groom's going to be embarrassed. That just seems weird. Which is also what makes it so true. All John knew was, this is what happened, and I'm going to record it. Bizarre as it was. Now, here's the thing, though. We now know, in looking back, that this was him pushing towards something. It was the beginning of something. And this first one was significant because it meant something in the bigger picture. It's an illustration just as much as it was a miracle. There was a picture that he was painting that was bigger than the miracle itself, if you will. And so that's what takes place. So when he runs out, it's a big deal. The groom's embarrassed. What are we going to do? Now, this next part in verse 3 that I don't want us to miss, the mother of Jesus says to him, just 4 words, very simple, they have no wine. Now, you could take this and over-spiritualize it and, say, well, Mary, she knew Jesus, and Jesus could do anything, and she knew that he would save the day and turn the water. She was not thinking about a miracle. I don't think, I mean, it's possible, I guess. Maybe she was in on it, in her head, God told her, I don't know. But I'm saying that more than likely, here's what I think happened. It had become customary in her life that when something went wrong, she turned to Jesus. I don't know, and who knows how Jesus would solve it, whether it was through practical ways, through spiritual ways, through miracles. I don't know. All she knew was there's a problem, and Jesus is the problem solver. Now, why is that significant? Because I would like to throw out to you, if you were like me and you're a fix-it person, problem happens, you just try to fix it. How's it working for you? Because for me, not so good. It never works out quite like I think it will. But here's what I have learned. Ask Jesus. The temperament of someone who says they follow Jesus, you're a follower of Jesus, that when something happens, that your knee-jerk reaction is, take it to God. Pause. Pray. Ask. I'm not saying he's going to do a miracle every time. I'm not saying I know how he will do it. Neither did Mary. All she knew was, there's a situation, ask Jesus. And all I'm telling you is when there's a situation, ask Jesus. Lean into him. And that's where the big idea for today comes from. Let's not seek a miracle anymore. Stop seeking a miracle. Seek the one who's capable of the miracle, Jesus. Because who knows how he'll answer it. We keep immediately looking and waiting for something. Rather, just lean into him. Turn to him, and he will bring the answers. And then there's that weird verse 4, when Jesus then responds to her question that is a good question, when he says to her, woman, what's this got to do with me? And I don't even know what to do with this one. My hour has not yet come. They just need some wine. They're out of wine, is all I'm saying. I've got a whole problem over here. Well, relax. So some people, you read some commentators, and here's what they want to do. They want to say, no, it wasn't as harsh as it sounded. It was more like, dear, dear. What does this have to? No, it does not say that. It says woman in a way that feels uncomfortable. It's like, ugh. And today he would have got shot. He would have been shut down. His Twitter account would have been closed. That's all I'm trying to tell you. And not good. So here's the thing I'm going to tell you. So I don't know if I have the right answer because it is a complex one. It's highly discussed. But I think it all lies in that last part. My hour has not yet come. Because it's a strange phrase. Here's what you understand. Jesus is God, right? But he's also fully human. Taking the context of the story, and that this then will become the kickoff. This miracle sets in motion the path towards the cross. This is that moment. This is the turn in his ministry where his public ministry begins. John chapter 2, not chapter 1, chapter 2. His public ministry is now going to kick off. And so he now knows in his head, and the wrestle begins between the human nature and the God nature of, I'm now moving towards the cross. This is it. And that inner struggle begins to kick in. Now, it ends there. And the miracle begins, or the illustration begins, and the movement begins in verse 5, which is good too. So take a look at verse 5. He says, Mary then continues, not offended, not bothered. I don't know if she got what was going on. She just turns to the others and says, and I think she knew it was weird. And she said, uh-oh, something's getting ready to happen. So she turns to the other guys and she says, do whatever he tells you. That simple. Do whatever he tells you. And let me tell you this. When you're seeking God for something, you have a part. You have a role. Do your part. Don't do God's part. Do your part. Whatever it is. Now, who knows what it is? She's just saying, do whatever he says. That's your part. Do your part. Do whatever he says. Keep in mind, ultimately, listen, just know this. In the bigger scheme of things, this has nothing to do with you. But at the same time, it has everything to do with you. You play a part, but it's really not about you, but it is about you. I know it's that weird craziness that goes on. And here's what we learn from this one. You lean into him. And when God speaks and tells you to do it, you just do it. It may not make sense, but do you trust him? Hang on to that. It's going to make sense in a second. So 6 jars. And let me just say this about jars. I'm going to do this real quickly. These are purification jars, very specific jars that they would use for cleansing on the outside. It's interesting that this outward cleansing element, which is what most of us tend to think about, Jesus takes this water meant to cleanse you on the outside. He transforms it into wine, which will clean you, which represents his blood. You're going to receive that, take it in, and it's going to clean you on the inside. That, remember I said this is also a picture, an illustration of his coming, the cross. And that's the picture that's being painted here. It's going to take purification, used to cleanse the outside, change it into wine. People are going to drink it, not knowing yet what this is going to mean for later on, but later on they're going to discover at the Lord's Supper, oh, this is about me being purified and cleansed on the inside to make you right. So that's what's happening here with this crazy purification jars. Verse 7 kicks in, and man, this is a biggie. You ready for this? Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. That's not the craziest part. The craziest part is that next line. And they filled them to the brim. They need wine. And Jesus says, hey guys, fill those jars with water to the top. It's stupid is what I'm trying to tell you. It makes no sense. He didn't say, hey, go get some grapes. We're going to stomp them out. Put some, even crazier, fill them with water, put a few grapes in each of them. Nothing. He just says, go fill them with water. And they didn't even question the weirdness of this situation. They don't need more water. They're needing wine. But however, they did exactly what he said. But listen, they didn't do just what he said. They filled it to the brim. Sometimes when you hang out with Jesus and you're looking for something, he's going to ask you to do something and it's not going to make sense. If you're asking and you're leaning in and God asks you to do something and it's not going to make sense, you start to explain it away. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. Well, what does that got to do with anything? I'm suffering here. Why would you want me to go do that? Why would you want me to talk to that person? Why would you want me to read that? Why would you want me to give over there? When God asks you to do something that doesn't make sense, do you trust him? That's the first question, but here's the second one. This is even better. How much do you trust him? To the brim? Is it brim trust? Listen, it's at the brim where God shows up. That's where he shows up and does what God does. God shows up. Listen, when you run out, God will show up. He'll speak. The question is, will you trust him? You trust Jesus, seek him, obey him. You do the natural so that God will show up and let him do the supernatural. Do you trust him? Stop seeking the miracle. Let's seek the one who is capable of the miracle, Jesus. So I want to show you an example of this, a story. Pastor Bob and his wife Michelle had a really weird situation, encounter, a miracle, if you will. Let's take a look.
I'm Rauscher. I'm one of the pastors here at Life Point.
And I'm Michelle Rauscher, his wife.
And we've been married for 25 years, 26 in June. So we were living in Phoenix, Arizona, actually suburbs of Phoenix in Chandler, Arizona. Had left the church we were at, just felt like God was calling us to a new season. Didn't really have an explanation. At that time I called it like an Abraham moment, a moment in which God was calling us out, but we didn't know where. When we started, we had 3 months worth of savings and all the hope that we would find something really quick because we were part of a big church and we just thought we had enough influence to find something else. So here we were 9 months into it, and I was working side jobs, coffee shops, doing weddings, funerals. It was one of those tough months. You know, I had all the bills paid, but I didn't have enough for rent. So I went to Michelle and just said, hey, babe, I don't have enough for rent. And she was like,
we'll pray. We'll pray. You know, growing up with a single mom and 4 kids, one severely handicapped, you know, God provided time and time again, and it may not have been in the way we wanted it to be provided, but it was always what we needed. And I think having that experience growing up, I knew that God was going to provide some way, somehow for us in this moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm a total skeptic. I didn't believe things like that happen. You know, the idea of praying and God, you know, somehow paying our rent for us. You know, I just thought pastors make up those stories just to, you know, convince us that if we pray more, if we, you know, do certain things that God will provide, and I just didn't believe it really happened. But, you know, it was like, yeah, God got us this far, we'll pray. So we prayed. It wasn't really till 2 days later that I was working at the coffee shop that I was at, and this guy walks in and walks right up to me and hands me an envelope, and I was like, do you need a coffee? No, he says, I just needed to give this to you. And so I stuck it in my pocket, and when I had free time then, I was able to open it up, and it was the exact amount of our rent, $1,100, and his business card. To which now I'm crying, because again, I don't believe these things happen. And I called Steve, his name was Steve, and I said, man, I don't even know you. And he says, but I know you, and what you don't know is my wife and I are prayer warriors. We just want to be obedient to what God calls us to do, and we were told to give that to you. How big a faith do you have to put $1,100 in an envelope and go to somebody you don't know and say, oh, I was told to give this to you? I think that's what changed us.
It was beautiful. And I think it propelled us to want to be and do that for others, because we had been given so much. How can we be generous in the way that God's been so incredibly generous to us?
Well, does God still do miracles? You know, yes. Yes, he does.
Being in Scripture and understanding how God's miracles play out aren't always how we're asking, but sometimes it's so much better than we could have ever. You know, we were asking for this, and he gives you this because that's God. Our God is so generous. But again, having eyes in a perspective that's different, to see the miracles for what they are. And sometimes because we're so focused on what we think it's going to be or should be, we miss it all around us.
Yeah, that's incredible, ain't it? It's a cool story. And here's the thing, did you see it? I'm going to ask you again, did you see it? Did you see the miracle that happened? Because here's what I think happens sometimes and when you hear this story, we're thinking about Bob and Michelle and them receiving this $1,100. That's the miracle. It's what they needed, right? But the miracle, in my opinion, what's crazy and what we need to hear is Steve. Because think about it. Here's this guy and his wife. I think it's the greater miracle. They're sitting in their house just praying. And God tells them to take a specific amount of money, $1,100, to a guy named Bob Rauscher at a coffee shop. Just give it to Bob. He knew who Bob was, but it's like, give Bob give him $1,100. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what Chris in his prayer time would have been saying. You said what? Because in my world, $1,100, that's a lot of money, right? I'm thinking, you said $11, I hope, because I got $11. But $1,100? You lost your mind. That's what I'm saying. Lord, I'm not going to be praying to you anymore. I can't afford you. You are expensive. Woo. And then he doesn't know even what's going to happen. But let me tell you something. Here's what I know based on the story. Steve, this is not the first time Steve heard from God. It's not the first time he was obedient when God asked him to do something stupid. I'm curious. I'd love to meet Steve and ask him if he had seen it so many times that it's just normal to him. I think we miss the miracles because we're not asking God for anything. We're not praying and saying, God, speak. Whatever you want to do, I'll be faithful and obedient. You don't see a miracle because you're not seeking the one who has the miracle. Just seek him. Lean into him. So here's what I'm going to close with. Let me close with this illustration. So music notes. There are 12, right? 12 basic music notes. Can I play them for you? Another magic trick. Here, ready? I know it's actually Ken right over there. But some of you were like, what? The basic 12 notes. Basic 12 notes. So this weirdo, scientist, mathematician dude, he said, I wonder how many combinations of notes you could do without ever repeating yourself. Some of you music people might know the answer to this. There's 479 million possible combinations. Not all of them are pretty. But there's 479 million combinations of notes. Think about that. 12 simple, easy notes that we just heard. 12 that have so many possibilities and the complexity that can come from just 12 notes. What can be done with it is so cool. In verse 7, Jesus tells them to fill the jars with water. With water. Now think about this. And this is just me. This is probably one of the greatest miracles. Because Jesus tells them to fill it with water. Maybe the greatest miracle outside the resurrection. He does something incredible with water that is so complex. It's creation-like, right? With just 3 parts. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Simple compound. Each bottle has about 100 complex chemical reactions firing in each of these jars. 6 stone jars, using the gallons that he references, 757 bottles of the best wine. Do you know how many grapes it would take to pull this off? 1 ton of grapes to pull this off. It would take 1 ton of grapes to make this happen. And he did all of that from water, 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. He could have, listen, the least Jesus could have done was throw a grape in each one of them or something. But he doesn't. And all the other miracles, the key ingredients are still there in the miracle. You think about raising Lazarus from the dead. You have the body. You think about the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. You have the loaves and the fishes. And here, he has no grapes, no, not one. And he takes H2O, the missing ingredient, not even one grape, and he makes something beautiful. He makes the best wine. Now, you're probably saying, Chris, okay, we get it. What's the big deal? Listen, in your life and in your circumstance, God does not need much. He just needs you. You just be faithful. You just be obedient. You do what he's asking you to do. God will show up and he will do the complex. And when you say, but the ingredients aren't there, Chris, you don't understand. I'm so angry. I have no self-control. There's nothing in me to even make that happen. God says, I can take and make something out of nothing. You struggle with fear, anxiety, and you're saying, man, there's nothing. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I've read every book. I don't know what to do. It's not there, Chris. God says, I can show up and I can do something out of nothing. The question is, will you ask? You have an addiction. And man, I've had addictions. I'm going to tell you, it is hard. It's almost impossible. In your brain, you're saying, there is nothing in me that can overcome this thing. And God says, I can show up and I can do something that you can't do. I can take something and make it out of nothing. And you have hatred in your heart for somebody who's hurt you and who's wounded you. And you said, I will never forgive them. It's not in me and I don't want to do it. I want to hurt them. And God says, I can step into that mess and I can take and make something out of nothing. And listen, the worst of all is when you have regret for what you have done. And you look in your past and you say, I'll never forgive myself for what I've done and what I've done to those people. And God said, you're in a perfect place for a miracle because I take very little and I do things that are unbelievably beautiful. I don't know what you're struggling with. You may see no hope or no answer to your situation. Let me ask you this question. Who are you trusting? Are you reading another book? Listening to another expert? Maybe you're like me and you're working really, really hard to fix it yourself. I got good news for you. God has 479 million possibilities for your situation. The combinations of things that he can do for you are so numerous and so large that you can't even imagine it. If you'll just stop seeking the miracle and begin to seek the one who is capable of the miracle, and his name is Jesus. Who do you trust? How much do you trust him? To the brim? Is it brim trust? Because that's how we're going to know. You ask him, you listen. You ask him and you listen. And when he speaks, you trust him. And you do it. You fill it to the brim. And God will step in with one of 479 million possible solutions to your problem. I'm going to end this. It's going to seem a little weird and it's going to seem like a right turn, but just follow me for 1 second. So you have the water into wine situation, and now we're seeing that this wine had purification issues, and that was the symbol that he was trying to put with this wine. Fast forward, the next time wine shows up is where? At the Lord's Supper, right? He's sitting in the upper room, and he brings out this wine again. And it's a pretty incredible moment because now he's going to do yet another, it's more symbolic in this moment, but he's going to transfer this wine into the symbol of his blood. And Jesus will drink first before he passes the cup. And as he drinks the cup of wrath, which is the specific cup that was there, what we deserve is wrath for what we have done. As he drinks it, he then passes it to us, and it becomes a bottomless glass of grace that he extends to us. And that, my friend, is the greatest miracle of all. See how these little things move from water to wine, wine to blood, and then he's going to go up on the cross where it becomes his literal blood that makes it possible for us to embrace him. what Jesus did, he now no longer, it's a weird thing because on the cross, we still sometimes will have these crosses that have Jesus still sitting on the cross. It's a weird imagery that we're so fascinated with crosses. What it should be isn't the cross. You know what it should be? The image that we should be, compelled to is the throne, because that's where Jesus sits. It's on the throne, and it's at that throne that he sits, and he is able to usher down the 479 million possible solutions to your situation. That's what we should be enamored with. And so today, I just want us to sit at the throne. I don't know where you're at and what your circumstance is, but today, you came in, you should have received the communion cups. And if you haven't, I'm sure there's some folks that can bring them to you. But what we're going to do in this moment is, I just want you to sit in the moment. We're going to sing over you. And man, I just want you to receive it. And the question is how much do you need him? How desperate are you for him? Are you so desperate? Are you desperate enough that you would begin to pray and to ask him to do what you're not able to do on your own? And then the bigger thing is, are you going to trust him to do what you can't do? Are you going to be faithful and do what he wants you to do? So let's just take a moment. There'll be some folks coming down. If you need to grab it, you can look towards the aisles and they will, they'll pass them to you. But I'm going to pray over you. I just want to take just a moment. I want to pray over you. Let's pray together. Let's just sit in this moment for a second. The first question is, do you trust him? And maybe the journey for you begins right there in the upper room where you need to receive the cup of grace, which is what this communion represents. His body, his blood. Listen, he gave himself for you, the greatest miracle of all. And it's because of that miracle that we can trust him, that he can show up in our circumstance. Maybe there's something you're specifically struggling with today. And sometimes we're seeking the big giant miracles, but sometimes the best and the most important miracles are those little ones. Father, move in this room. God, you know our hearts, and you are still the God of miracles. There are some that are fighting you and pushing against you. And God, I say right now, would you just penetrate their hearts? And God, there are some people in here who are desperate for you. God, they're in bad situations. They don't want to do their end. God, may they hear you this time. May they not keep seeking a specific thing, but they just seek you. And God, my prayer is this: would you speak today? Just begin to pray right where you are. What are you asking God for? Just ask him. Sit in this moment. God, here's my prayer. Would you once again show up? Show up in our circumstances right now. God, begin to speak and prod and nudge and push us where you want us to be. Some of us in here, we're looking for the $1,100. And God, some of us in here, we're the ones you're using to deliver the $1,100. God, may we just listen to you. And God, regardless of our circumstance, will we trust you? And then how much will we trust you? To the brim? God, move today. We desperately need you. May that be our prayer today. God, we need you.